Mackenzie, Sie sprechen Deutsch?
Okay. So, guten Tag miteinander.
Verrückter Sternenkeim, nicht laufen heute, verrückt, Herrgottskeim.
Es gibt Leute, die würden alle die Wege nie.
Ich gehe mit dem, und wenn ich auf 0 Franken vom Armenrecht muss mit dem, ich gehe vor mit dem, wo ich will.
Sorry, ich habe gespritzt.
Snejpüti.
Nein, Angst und Geld habe ich keine.
Was unterscheidet Menschen vom Schimpans?
Kappen schauen, Mann. Sie muss da reinschauen, Herz.
Biasen und Schafsäckchen.
So sieht man wirklich schwarz, nicht nur rot.
Ausländer muss pass auf in Engelberg, weil Engelberg ist meine Land.
Und was man noch hoffen kann, ist allein, dass sie Hemmungen haben.
Was hast du erlebt, du hure Banane?
Die berühmte, feine Mohrenköpfe.
Sali, hallo zusammen und grüezi miteinander. Welcome to the 9th edition of the Swiss German Initiative. My name is Fabian. As always, before we begin, some administrative information. As I said in the last episode, the next month I probably need to change to another solution. But till then, if you want to join the stream and learn some Swiss German, please create a Discord account, comment in the respective post on our Schweizerdeutsch with your name so I can send you the link. And if you have any questions for the show today, either write them in the chat or in the post questions with the current date in our Schweizerdeutsch. So let's begin. So the last time I ended the episode with mentioning the Battle of Marignano and the Reformation without getting into it. I presented some point as well, which you have to fulfill to expand, or to say it bluntly, to land grab. Now, I will not explain them in this episode again. If you want to know the details, watch it in the last episode. But at this point, the Swiss already had two major flaws which prevented rapid expansion. One was the lack of a centralized organization, and the other was that they already adhered to ritualistic combat. The Swiss had what they called a Tagsatzung, which started nearly at the same date as the old Confederacy. They should have acted as a centralized authority, which in those days most of the time would have been a fürst, so a prince, or a herzog. The Tagsatzung gave out so-called Abschiede, or eidgenössische Abschiede, which would be a decree. But their powers were limited, as the decision ultimately laid in the hands of the cantons. Now with every canton added, more interests started to add as well. As one can imagine, this led to an interest hierarchy, where you first had the interest of the canton, then the Tagessatzung, which itself was influenced by personal interest or company interests, depending how you look at it. And while I think that it's a good thing to have a better life for a citizen nowadays, if you want to expand and act as a regional power, this is hindering. Another problem was that in the years leading up to Marignano, the Swiss provided soldiers, the so-called Reisläufer, to both sides of some conflicts. Or as in the case of the Alte Zürich Krieg in 1440 to 1450, Zürich itself allied with Habsburg against the rest of the Confederacy. So let's get through some couple of words. The first one would be Tagsatzung, which comes from Tag, i.e. day, and Sitzen, so to set. To this day, we use some of those terms or cognates thereof. We still have Tagig, or German Tagung, which can imply, but doesn't have to, that the conference, meeting or gathering is lasting a day. Same as in English as you set a date. So you say, "Du wir noch das Datum setzen," or "let's set the date." Or setzen wir das Datum auf den Samstag oder auf den Samstag an. Which means let's add a day to Saturday. Then we have Abschiede. Abschied would be to say goodbye, but if used with a Gesetz, so law, it means to pass a law. So as Gesetz für Abschiede. And then we have the Reisläufer, which comes from Reise, so traveling, and Läufer, which means running or walking. Now, Läufer, laufen, in Swiss German means walking. In German, it means running. And this is the term which the Swiss used for mercenary foot soldiers. Now, why Reise? Because they were not used for their own country, and the difference from that time to today is that regular peasants during that time didn't really travel. Traveling for holidays is a relatively new invention, especially to other countries. I mean, longer holidays is something that happened in the last century. And distances where today you need like an hour or two with the car, in those days it could take you days depending on the terrain and the condition of the streets, if any even were present. Now, a mercenary on a horse was called a Reisiger or a Reisigerknecht. And then we have the Fürst, i.e. a prince or a ruler. The word stems from the Latin principes, so the first in order, which is why it's so similar to first in English, as it stems from the exact same root. Excuse me. I'm not sure why and when the differentiation happened, that prince or a prince has royal blood or implies royal blood, while the Fürst doesn't. But it must have been pretty early, as the term does not exist in English. And then we have Herzog, so a duke, which stems from Heer, where there is no one-to-one translation, but it means the entirety of the army. And Zog, which comes from ziehen, so English pull. So you pull an army, i.e. you lead an army. And if you remember last time, pull and lead in German have the same root, which I explained in the last episode, where I mentioned the Indo-European word deuk or duke, which meant pull or lead, which is as well the root of the English word duke, where it's still pretty near, where in the Germanic version it got split into tukon and toihan or teuhan, where tukon means push or strike, and toihan or teohan means pull or lead, which later of a couple of iterations morphed into ziehen. So toihan, ziehen, something like that. So back to the Battle of Marignano. Now, I will not get much into the battle or the factions, because I think it would take hours, if not even days or weeks, to explain all of it. Just as a reference, here we have all the factions from the Holy Roman Empire in the 1400s. With this, one might see why Voltaire said the Holy Roman Empire was neither Holy Roman or, as in this case, an empire. So back to the battle. The Swiss were allied and fought for the French until 1499, or as the case is for the French king, which is basically a payment contract. This led to that 10 years later, the Pope Julius, a self-described enemy of the French, could gain for a Soldbündnis for himself. At first it was prohibited by the Tagsatzung to use soldiers against France. This changed because France refused to pay a fine for the murder of 2 envoys in their territory. This led to that later the Swiss even joined the War of the League of Cambrai, also called the War of the Holy League, where the Holy League was an alliance between a couple of empires and the Papal States. This ended in another takeover of Milan. And yes, again, Milano, from the French by the Swiss. A small skirmish, which probably rather was bait, led the Swiss to attack the French and the Venetian forces at as the name says, Marignano. Now, baited in a manner of choosing your terrain rather than a trap. Because trapping a couple of thousand people doesn't work. And it doesn't work if it's not already built into the terrain. So if you have a narrow passage or something like that, it works. But if you have open fields, you can choose your terrain. But it would be really difficult to trap 1,000 people. Now, thanks to Hollywood, people think that during those times, people in battle or soldiers in battle would just run to each other and slaughter and so forth, which is wrong. Battles were fought slow and formational. So choosing your territory is really important. So on the first day, the Swiss actually had a couple of successes. Probably because the French didn't expect them to arrive at the same day and attack during that afternoon. They fought into the night and slept there. And the next day, after back and forth, the Swiss, after some heavy losses, retreated. So they were defeated. After this defeat, the Tag Satzung decided to reinforce Milan heavily. But most cantons simply didn't send their men. And the ones who did returned then when realizing the other ones didn't. And thanks to the lack of reinforcements, Milan, or Milano, was again taken over by the French, but this time without a fight, because the surviving Swiss simply left. This is said to be the beginning to the path to neutrality, but I think it rather was something like NATO 0.1, because the agreement that France and Switzerland signed was a non-aggression pact with the guarantee of mercenaries if France wasn't attacked. So this sounds more like NATO than neutrality. So this was it for Holier Than Thou for today. In the next episode, I will get into the Reformation. Let's switch to some Swiss German sayings or words. So last time we got up to the letter C, and so we continue with D. The first word would be dem Fall, which in German would be in diesem Falle, English in this case. It's used as in, well, in this case, like that, but it's implying that what you actually talked about is either accepted or you will do it, or the criteria is fulfilled. Next one would be Dümpfiff. It's the same as in German. The one-to-one English translation would be a narrow whistle, which means diarrhea. Another word for it would be the Schießer, so having the shitter. Then we have deftig. Deftig is hearty, so like in a hearty meal. But we don't use it that way. You could, but it's not really used. And it's actually used in the exact same manner as damn. It's like deftig, damn. Then we have dumme Siech. The one-to-one translation is stupid, plague-infected guy. A couple of things about this. First, dumm. Most people will actually pronounce it with a T, so dumme Siech. But in writing, as we learned writing in German, or most people have in Switzerland, or in the German talking part of Switzerland, most will probably write it with a D instead of a T. And Siech is used as a colloquial, I hate this word, word for guy. And depending on the adjective you put in front of it, the meaning kind of changes. I mean, it is derogatory, but if you say like geile Siech, it's positive. So it's a little bit of banter, but I say in a positive manner. Now, Siech, it's not really used in original meaning anymore, which was a sick or infested guy. Siech from Seuche, Swiss German, or Seuchen in German. Seuchen, so didn't pronounce it correctly. Then we get to I and Schöne. is short for einen schönen Tag wünsche ich. So, have a nice day. Or German, ich wünsche einen schönen Tag. Now, if you say the full sentence, you need to add a wünsche, because if you only say schöner Tag, it would be ambiguous, and the people would rather understand that the day is nice than to have a nice day. And gute is the term we wish each other to have a good meal, which in English is to enjoy, but it isn't used that much. In German, Mahlzeit, or French, Bon Appetit. And falsche, or a falsche, if for women, means a wrong one. But if you say ist ein falsche, or sie ist a falsche, means that's an untrustworthy person. Next one would be eben, or ebbe, depending on the dialect. Now, while this word exists in German as well, eben, only some meanings work in both languages. So, flat, even, or in a form of acceptance is in both languages, but it can't be used as nearly or just now in Swiss German. If I said it as a single reply, it has the same meaning of exactly or as I said. So, eben, exactly. So next one would be Eis go ziehen. In German, eins ziehen gehen. Or in English, go to pull one, which means having a drink. This term is only not used if you got a specific event, like an apéro. An apéro is a pre-dinner drink. Or if you talk to kids. As far as I know, it comes from the act how you fill a beer. So you pull down the lever and the beer comes out. And this is why you say, ich kann Eis gut ziehen. So let's get to F. First one would be Fotzelschnitte. This is the Swiss or the German equivalent of a French toast. Difference is that we make it with old bread, as to not just throw it away. Now, Fotzel stems from Fötzel, and not the derogatory term for the lower woman parts, which would be Fotzel without an L. So, Fötzel means a piece of paper, like a tear of a piece of paper or a piece of cloth could be as well, but mostly it's paper. Now, a Fötzel could also be a derogatory or diminishing term for a person. So it's like a lurli or something like that would be a Fötzel. So next one would be Füdli. Füdli is the butt. It's the word used if you have to talk to children, so that you don't have to curse or be unpolite. But thanks to that, it has a childish undertone. This word stems from foot or foot. I'm not really sure if it had an U or not, but this meant an exposed butt of a woman. And the li is not the cutified version, it actually stems from Loch. So the original meaning was asshole. Next one would be freu mich. So German, ich freue mich. Or English, I am happy. If it's used as a single term, it means I'm looking forward to. Or if you ask somebody, freust dich, it means are you looking forward to. If you want to ask somebody if he's happy over a certain circumstance, you say bist zufrieden. So, are you satisfied? Or ask, are you satisfied? Next one would be Füßle, which German would be Füßeln. It's playing footsies. Führer, German nach vorne, so to the front. So if you say Geh Führer, it would mean go to the front. Schau Führer, look to the front, and so forth. Fürschi is vorwärts, English forward. Now, there's also vorwärts in Swiss German, and it's completely interchangeable. And then we have the last letter, which would be the G. First one, gfrörli, comes from frieren, so having cold, which is a person who feels cold quickly. We have the gstabi. This is the derogatory term for someone who is clumsy, or socially awkward, or really thin built. Then we have gummer, which means gehen wir. But if it's used as a single expression, it means let's go, or can we go, depending on how you pronounce it. If you use it with go, followed by a verb, it's asking to do the respective activity with the person or group you ask. So, gehen wir go essen means, are we going to eat? Or gehen wir go Tennis spielen? Are we going to play tennis? And so forth. Then we have siehst, would be German siehst du, which is used in the same manner as when you say in English see, siehst. So in a form or in a manner of I told you so. And you would say like siehst, ich has dir gesagt. Then we have grusig, would be in German widerlich or hässlich, so disgusting or revolting, creepy. Then gickerig would be German erregt, English horny, if it's used by itself. But it can be colloquially used as heavily anticipated, which adds a funny tone. And yeah, thanks to the context, people will know that it's not aroused, but it's an anticipation. And then we have gaggle or giggle or Berndeutsch gaggle, which would be a piece of something, but it's actually only used for a piece of excrement. And the last one would be giggele. It's the absolute same as giggle in English or kichern in German. So, if you don't have any further questions, which I'm checking right now, this was it for today. So give me a couple of seconds. Sali, hoi zusammen und grüezi. So, seems that we have no questions. It was a little bit shorter this week. Yeah, that was all. So see you next week and